This is Actar's Reviews, from anime to figures and beyond. Hey, this is Actar and you're watching another episode of Actar's Toy Reviews. Hot on the heels of MPM Bumblebee, it is my great pleasure to be able to present to you MPM-4, Masterpiece Movie Optimus Prime, the second release in the rebooted Masterpiece movie line. Yes, he's finally here. As many of you already know, ROTF leader Optimus Prime is one of my all-time favorite Transformers figures due to its complex design and faithful recreation of its on-screen character. With ROTF leader Prime already considered a masterpiece by many fan standards, including my own, this new toy has big shoes to fill. And I can tell you right now that unlike MPM Bumblebee, this is not going to be black and white. While MPM Optimus does do quite a number of things right, it does drop the ball on many others. There's a ton to get into, so without further ado, let's begin. As mentioned in the MPM Bumblebee review, this rebooted Masterpiece movie line is co-produced by Hasbro and Takara Tomy and will eventually be made available in both Japan and the US as Toys R Us exclusives. The box is exactly the same in terms of design as MPM Bumblebee's and is made to fit right in with the rest of the Masterpiece line. Of course, it's much bigger to fit the gentle, not so gentle giant. And on the back, various features of the figure including the much awaited integrated battle mask. So let's open the box and take a look at the figure inside. In addition to the instruction sheet that's strangely not fully coloured, he does come with 3 accessories, 2 Energon swords and an ion blaster. While Optimus is packaged in robot mode, for this review, we'll be starting off with him in vehicle mode. If you want to see the transformation from robot mode to vehicle mode, do check out the companion video, link in the description. As the Masterpiece movie line is meant to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the live-action movie franchise, MPM Optimus here is based on how he looks in the first movie. To clear the air, this is a completely brand new mold that takes only a couple of engineering cues from ROTF leader Prime, mostly when it comes to the legs. That being said, I don't think this vehicle mode can hold a candle to the ROTF leaders. I am not that big of a fan, and the reasons for that are numerous. Firstly, the kibble. Compared to the ROTF leaders vehicle mode, MPM Prime's truck mode does a rather poor job of hiding the robot parts. You can clearly see the legs hanging off the underside and poking through large gaps on the rear of the truck. This leads me directly into the second issue I have with the MPM's vehicle mode. Part of why you can see so much of the robot mode in vehicle mode is because of the very poor vehicle mode proportions. The smokestacks are too short, the gas tanks are minuscule, the wheel wells are narrow, and the headache rack is tiny. Speaking of inaccuracies, the hood of the truck is missing the airbrushed yellow paint. The fact that the front wheel wells still have the yellow paint just makes the omission all the more glaring. The thing is, I can still accept all of these issues, because once we get to robot mode, you'll see that many of these sacrifices and design choices were to make the robot mode more aesthetically pleasing, and to minimize the number of full parts. Hey, after all, no sacrifice, no victory, am I right? But what I cannot accept is sloppy engineering. As I mentioned in the transformation video, there are many areas on the vehicle mode that refuse to tab in properly, chief of which is the hood and the front windshield section. No, I can assure you that it is not me transforming the figure wrongly. Yes, it's complex, but unlike ROTF leader Prime and even MP Megatron, the tolerances are just horrible. This is an issue that affects many copies of the figure released thus far, and from people who own multiple copies, I can confirm that tolerances vary from figure to figure, as some figures can pack in much better than others. In these past couple of days, I did a bit of digging, testing out various pieces and unscrewing parts here and there to figure out what was causing the problem. In the end, I managed to discover that on mine, this issue is caused by a molding error. For some bizarre reason, the hood pieces and the holes on the bottom of the windshield pieces on mine are angled downwards. What this means is that unless the hood section is pointing downwards as well, there is no way for everything to peg together securely. Taking the arms completely out of the equation, look at how it refuses to stay down. Look at how much the hood pieces warp and how much force it springs back up with. Was this an engineering oversight? A design flaw? Maybe it was an unintended consequence of fixing the exposed grey hinges in the robot mode's chest. Or it could simply boil down to poor quality control. While it might not be a universal issue, it's still going to be a gamble as to whether or not yours will be able to peg in well. Whatever the case, thanks to this issue, there is no way to get the side windows aligned properly with the rest of the doors. Not to mention, they won't peg in all the way, and the smokestacks won't line up with the pipes below them. From what I've heard, you can disengage this lock on the underside to help the pipes reach the smokestacks. But by that point, you've pretty much admitted that they've screwed up. That's not all. Compared to the ROTF leader, there are very few pegs holding the entire vehicle mode together, and many of those pegs don't seem to have a solid resting position. Don't get me wrong, it holds together well enough, but it doesn't feel as solid or cohesive. For instance, it's lacking tabs in the front wheel wells that secure them to the grille, and tabs below the doors. And lastly, just like with ROTF Leader Prime, in robot mode, the front grille becomes the feet. You would think that they would have figured out a way to prevent the paint from scraping, considering the fact that the front grille is one of the most conspicuous parts of the truck. Like, for instance, having raised pieces on the toes for the robot mode to stand on. But, as you can see, just after a bit of posing and sliding, a ton of paint has been rubbed off, revealing a rather unsightly grey plastic beneath. Unless you want this to happen to yours as well, you'll have to take extra care when posing your figure in robot mode. Whatever the case, I think that all of these issues are inexcusable on a masterpiece figure, especially after you realize the fact that the ROTF leader class figure was less than half the price, made almost a decade ago for kids, and has none of these problems. While I'm here, some collectors might not like the mechanical detailing on the inside of the front windshield, but to be dreadfully honest, it doesn't bother me that much. Alright, so now that we've gotten the bad out of the way, what's good about vehicle mode? Well, firstly, despite being mostly unpainted, the red and blue plastic does have metallic flakes in them. We do have the return of the lovely pinstriping, even though it's nowhere near as fine or intricate as Buster Prime's. It's nice and heavy thanks to all of the diecast, which we'll be getting into in robot mode, and personally, I'm really impressed that the vehicle mode ends up much smaller than the ROTF leaders, despite turning into a robot that's about the same size. Whether or not it scales well with MPM Bumblebee is another issue in and of itself. And of course, before I forget, he rolls very well. But the best thing about vehicle mode? It's compatible with MP10's trailer. Now that's a stroke of genius. And yes, in case you were curious, MPM Bumblebee can fit inside MP10's trailer. Before we move on to robot mode, there is unfortunately no place to store the weapons inconspicuously in vehicle mode, unlike MPM Bumblebee's arm cannon. The two swords peg onto the sides of the blaster, and the blaster itself pegs onto the fifth wheel. Yeah, it's rather unsightly, but at least they gave you some way to store the weapons, and you can't really blame them for trying. Alrighty, I think I've said more than my fair share about vehicle mode, so now it's time to see if those sacrifices were worth it as we take a look at robot mode. To start transforming MPM Prime, we first unpeg the wheel wells, the gas tanks, and the side panels. Moving on to the front of the truck, we unpeg the grille and split the entire truck in half. We then split the legs, pull them down on this double hinge, and swing them down. Flip open this blue panel, tuck away the smokestack pipe into the toolbox, flip down the wheel, and collapse all of these panels into the leg. To form the feet, we flip open the toes and accordion up these panels. Pressing on the tops of these inner leg panels will pop them out, freeing up the ankle joints. Pulling out the panels on the back of the legs will give these side panels enough clearance to close completely. Flip down the knee guards and angle the wheels to complete the leg transformation. Collapse the smokestacks and fold up the sides of the cab. Fold up the headache rack, disconnect the top section of the cab, and fold it all the way back. Split the arms apart, and bring them out to the sides. Fold up the rear of the truck, and secure the waist together by sliding it in on this track. To lock everything in place, flip up this matrix chamber, and fold up this die-cast ab piece. Fold up the smokestacks. Secure Prime's head by pegging it over the headache rack. And now we can work on the chest. Start by unpegging the front windshield sections and splitting them apart. Pull open the side windows on this double hinge and peg the chest panels into place. Flip out the shoulder pieces and peg the arms in into the sides of the chest pieces. To complete the arms, we fold up the shoulder pad on the double hinge while rotating the air filter into place. Fan out this forearm piece, rotate this flame piece, and lock it into place. Collapse the hood on this double hinge to form the abs. Angle up these visors on the double hinge. Fold up the headlights. And fold the side windows over the front of the chest. And finally, we work on the back. Fold up the wheel wells. And align the back panels. Despite some annoying flaws that we'll be getting into, this is the mode you buy MPM Optimus Prime for. It's gorgeous to behold, and boy does he strike an imposing silhouette. This time round, let's start with the good. Firstly, the transformation. In the movies, the robot's transformation schemes are never consistent. The designers decided to go with the one where part of the front of the truck becomes his abs instead of having the hood form the entirety of his arms. Personally, even though I would have preferred the latter, I cannot deny the fact that it's rather brilliant. By doing so, they've managed to minimize kibble and the use of 4 parts and maximize the use of space. In fact, there's practically zero kibble. Any truck part that's left hanging off the robot mode is there on the CGI model. Compared to ROTF Leader Prime, it's way more streamlined and cohesive. Not only are the little things like the toolboxes on the legs and the large forearm panels no longer there on the MPM, the proportions are much better and the backpack is completely gone. As mentioned previously, it's really amazing how the MPM ends up at about the same height as the ROTF Leader despite having a much smaller vehicle mode. More things to note on the MPM include the wheels being flat up against the legs, the 5th wheel ending up on the back, just like a CGI model, and the use of non-4 headlights on the front. While he does have fewer ratchet joints than the ROTF Leader, believe it or not, he does have a ton of die-cast parts, including the headlight, the inner ab piece, the shins, and the feet that give the figure a ton of weight. Overall, the robot mode is just so much more solid than vehicle mode. Everything has a spot to tab in, and you can pick it up and shake it without things coming undone. Well, except the back panels. These two back panels are the only truly loose pieces in robot mode. They kind of latch in as opposed to peg in, and they can come undone at the slightest touch. Regarding the back, this is why the gas tanks and the rear wheel wells had to be so small. It's all for the sake of making the backpack as compact as possible while maintaining the front silhouette of robot mode. It does get the job done, though I honestly think they went overboard, considering the fact that the gas tanks on the back of the CGI model were gigantic. Not to mention, I really wish they went one step further and collapsed the backpack just a little more, so that the flame panels and gas tanks were more angled out and the wheel wells were situated a little higher up on his back. The ROTF Leader did that pretty well. Other things I'm not that big a fan of regarding the MPM include the small head that's set way too low. They really should have given him an extendable neck joint, either that or made the chest sit slightly lower. Speaking of the chest, as I alluded to when going over vehicle mode, there was a design flaw with the chest that exposed this unsightly grey hinge. And to fix this, what they did was not move the chest panels down, but to move the ab pieces up. Because the ab pieces are sitting way too high now, not only do they push the chest panels out of their natural sitting position, exacerbating the short neck look, they also no longer cover both circles on the die-cast piece. I really wish they'd found a way to lower the chest pieces instead, because as is, the gap between them is way too wide and they should be able to cover the center hinge. Another thing to note about the ab pieces is that they are also the wrong shape. Instead of being a square on the top, they are now a triangle, pointing in at a much steeper angle. Moving on, while I think they did an absolutely commendable job with the lack of full parts, it does lead to a ton of issues if the CGI model doesn't shy away from cheating. For instance, fans weren't too happy about the truncated side doors. It does also lead to a plethora of paint issues. Most obviously and glaringly are the excess blue flames on the ab pieces and the front of the forearms. On the sides of the forearms, we only have the tail ends of the flames and we lack that orange paint. Even though they're rather blatant, these I can still understand as necessary compromises for the transformation. The thing is, the issues regarding the paint don't stop there. There is a ton of missing paint and paint errors as well. One minor one is the mispainted crest on Optimus's forehead, where there isn't supposed to be a break in the silver. But most egregiously is the fact that many of the parts are only half painted. The thighs, gas tanks, and upper arm cuffs are only painted on the front. And also, why is there so much of this flat, unappealing, unpainted grey plastic all over the figure? Looking at the box, so much more of the figure is painted. Where are the blue stripes, the gold rings, and the minuscule Autobot logo? None of the die-cast pieces are painted on the figure. This is a literal half-hearted paint job that makes the figure feel really unfinished. As is, the paint on the MPM is nowhere near as premium as many of the ROTF leader variants to have come out over the past few years. This lack of paint really doesn't do the top-notch sculpting any favors. I mean, just take a look at that gorgeous head sculpt. And since we're on the face, what does put him over the ROTF leader are his features. And firstly, we have that integrated battle mask straight off Armor Knight Optimus Prime. Simply pull up his face, rotate it, and flip it back into place. It's easy, it's effective, it's brilliant. This is pretty much my favorite feature on this figure by far. His second gimmick is the removable Matrix of Leadership. Yes, despite this figure supposedly representing his first movie incarnation, he does come with the Matrix of Leadership. Future-proofing for DOTM? The steps needed to access the Matrix chamber is exactly the same as with MP10, which is a really nice throwback, intentional or not. Spread open the front of the chest, flip down the silver ab piece, and flip open the inner cover to reveal the Matrix of Leadership, held in by two pegs. You do have to be careful though, as pulling down the die-cast ab piece frees up the transformation joints, making it really easy for the top half of the body to detach from the bottom half. The Matrix is die-cast and resplendent, from the side at least, because unfortunately, what could have been a beautiful sculpt has been marred by two gigantic peg holes. Why they had to put peg holes on both sides, I don't know. Here's how it sizes up next to MP10's Matrix and the Matrix that comes with Voyager Battle Blade Optimus. Truth be told, as much as I feel this gimmick to be completely unnecessary and inaccurate, and maybe even the reason for how the chest transforms, I actually really like it. It's a cool feature and one that captures the essence of Optimus Prime. And come on, who wouldn't want to see him in a Matrix measuring contest with MP10? Fanfiction aside, another reason I say that the Matrix gimmick is future-proofing is because of his weapons. He comes with two Energon swords despite only using one in the first movie, and instead of having the swords replace his hands, they peg on behind them. I can't deny that he looks freaking badass. He also comes with an ion blaster that isn't made out of his gas tanks, though that's technically accurate. Just like with MPM Bumblebee, he stores his weapons on his back by plugging the blaster into the fifth wheel. Unfortunately, there is no way of storing the swords by themselves if you want to use the blaster alone. Next up, those action poses I just showed you would not have been possible without the amazing articulation, and this is where the figure once again shines. For his head, it can move up and down and side to side. Unfortunately, it is hindered by the side chest pieces and it's not on the ball joint thanks to the battle mask gimmick. The arms can move forwards and backwards on a ratchet joint but in and out on a normal joint. The shoulder pads are double jointed. There is a side to side swivel joint. The elbows can bend past 90 degrees. The wrists can rotate from side to side and move in and out. Unfortunately, unlike MPM Bumblebee, only the forefinger has two joints. The rest of the fingers are fused together as one piece, and the thumb has this really weird mid-knuckle joint. MPM Prime does have a really lovely waist joint, though it is hindered by this tail-like section. What you can do to increase the waist's range of movement is to put on the legs on this double hinge. You can also angle the wheels to your liking. In addition to the double hip joint, the legs can move forwards and backwards on a ratchet joint and in and out on this normal joint that I fear may get looser with time. It does have an unhindered swivel in the thigh and an excellent double knee joint. One of the joints is ratcheted while the other is not. And finally, the feet are not on ball joints but on a series of hinges. They can move up and down and side to side. And lastly, here are some size comparisons. Results may vary depending on how much those double hip joints are extended. Here he is together with Buster Prime, MP10, TLK Voyager Prime, Voyager Battle Blade Prime, Deluxe Protoform Prime, and MPM Bumblebee. Some say that Bumblebee is slightly too tall, but you won't be seeing me opening that can of worms. In conclusion, MPM-4 Optimus Prime is a mixed bag. This figure does a ton of things very well, but it also has a ton of flaws. The vehicle mode cannot tap together properly, it has a ton of kibble, it has proportion issues, and it doesn't feel as together as it could have been. The robot mode, on the other hand, I have to admit is really good. In terms of the sculpt, the proportions, the articulation, and how they manage the kibble. In terms of all of these aspects, it excels. In fact, it's unequivocally the most dynamic and expressive Optimus Prime figure to date due to the lack of kibble complementing the impressive articulation. However, you still have the loose back panels, the missing paint, and the inaccuracies to consider. Unlike MPM Bumblebee, where both modes are pretty much flawless, you're going to have to get this one purely for the robot mode. If you think that the robot mode is worth the asking price, go ahead and get it. But consider this. Is a robot mode all you want in a masterpiece level figure? Yes, it is a figure of compromise, but as is, I cannot in good conscience say that this figure is the second coming of ROTF Leader Prime. In fact, with all of the accessories and third-party support available for the ROTF Leader, frankly, it's hard to recommend the MPM over any of the later premium releases. Even the paint is nowhere near as good as Buster Prime's. Will they improve future batches? Was the Singapore release a rushed release only to capitalize on the movie and the anniversary? Only time will tell. Until then, this is Actar saying, see you guys in the next episode.